Continue, and we await, as we await the Prime Minister, as I said, likely to be the John Most Vital. The Prime Minister to back and feels like Chris Williamson. And here we go, actually, finally, 5 minutes late, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I should have further such meetings later today.
Everyone McKinnell.
The government must take responsibility for its role in the now left by William. Thousands of staff face unemployment, SME suppliers face growing costs, but I'm concerned for the 1,400 brilliant apprentices, some of whom I've met locally. It's not good enough to pass the buck to CITB. So will the Prime Minister guarantee today that every one of those apprentices will be able to complete their training and will be paid?
Concerned about their jobs, about public services, and about their pensions. I want first of all, I'm going to speak to provide reassurance to all employees who are working in public services for Carillion that they should continue to turn up to work, confident in knowledge that they'll be paid for the work that they're providing. But of course, the government is not running Carillion. The government is actually a customer of Carillion, and our focus has been on ensuring that we are providing the public services that are continuing to be provided uninterrupted, to reassure workers on those public services that they'll get paid, to reassure the pensioners and make sure the support's there for them. And yes, I'm coming on to the apprentices, but it's important. Government is undertaking its role to ensure that the services it provides are continued. And I can assure the Honourable Lady that we are aware of the issues around apprentices, and that's why the Minister with responsibility for that will be looking very carefully at what action can be taken.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What's a better way to start the year of engineering than to see manufacturing output at its highest level in a decade? Productivity on the front. Can I invite my right on the thread to commit her government to secure keeping manufacturing full excellence? I'm very happy to be my friend that commitment from the government. And she's absolutely right. It's very, very pleasing to see the figures that the ONS produced last week, which show that production has now grown for 8 months, the longest streak since 1994. Manufacturing output is at its highest since February 2008. And earlier this month, we saw that productivity growth has had its best quarter since 2011. That shows that our economy remains strong, that we're continuing to deliver secure, better paid jobs, and we will continue to and supporting our manufacturing sector. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the last 6 months, the government awarded more than £2 billion worth of contracts. It did so even after the share price free fall, and the company issued profit warnings. Why did the government do that?
It might be helpful if I just set out for the right honourable gentleman that a company's profit is that it believes it will not make as much profit as had expected. The government did. It was the case that the government pulled out of contracts, or indeed private sector companies pulled out of contracts whenever a profit warning was issued. That would be the providing continuing uninterrupted public services. Yes, we did. We did recognise that it was a severe profit warning, and that's why we took action in relation to the contracts that we issued, and we ensured that all but one of those contracts was a joint venture. What does that mean? It means that there is another company available to step in and take over the contract. But I say to the right honourable gentleman, this wasn't just an issue of the government issuing contracts. Actually, we see that the Labour-run Welsh Government issued a contract after the profit warning last July, and only last week, in the public sector, a public sector body announced that Carillion was their preferred bidder. Only last week. Was that the government? No. It was Labour-run Leeds City Council.
Mr. Speaker, for the record, Leeds have not signed a contract with Carillion. It's the government who's been handing out contracts. It's the government's responsibility to ensure Carillion is properly managed. Between July, Mr. Speaker, between July and the end of last year, the share price of Carillion fell by 90%. 3 profit warnings were issued. Unbelievably, some contracts were awarded by the government even after the 3rd profit warning. Mr. Speaker, it looks like the government was handing Carillion public contracts either to keep the company afloat, which clearly hasn't worked, or it was just deeply negligent of the crisis that was coming down the line.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy to answer questions when the right honourable gentleman asks one. He didn't.
Or not, and they clearly have been very negligent. Tory MPs might shout, Mr. Speaker, but the reality is, as of today, over 20,000 Carillion workers are very worried about their future, and for many of them, the only recourse tonight is to phone a DWP hotline. The frailties were well known. Hedge funds were betting against Carillion since 2015. RBS Bank, state-owned, making provision against Carillion last year. The government is supposed to protect public money through Crown representatives who are supposed to monitor these powerful corporations who get huge public contracts. So why, and this is a question that the Prime Minister needs to answer, and the question is this: why did the position of Crown representative to Carillion remain vacant during the crucial period of August to November when the profit warnings were being issued, the share price was in free fall, and many people were very worried?
I'm afraid I have to say to the right honourable gentleman, can I say to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, I will indeed answer the question. I know that she herself has praised Carillion in the past. Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, yes, I mean, there is obviously now a Crown representative who is being fully involved in government's response before the appointment of the Crown representative to replace the one that had previously been in place. The government chief commercial officer and the cabinet office director of markets and suppliers took over those responsibilities. So it was not the case that there was nobody from the government who was looking at these issues. That's a standard procedure. It ensured that there was oversight of Carillion's contracts with the government during the appointment process of the Crown representative.
Well, it clearly wasn't looking very well. Carillion went into liquidation with debt we now understand to be 1.29 billion. Pension deficit of 600 million, and at the same time, this company was paying out ever-increasing shareholder dividends, while the excessive bonuses to directors And today, 8,000 Carillion workers on private sector contracts will no longer be paid. The chief executive is going to be paid, however, for another 10 months. One rule for the super rich, another for everybody else. Can the Prime Minister assure the House today that not a single penny more will go to the chief executive or the directors of this company?
Can I first say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, obviously this is a situation that is changing as decisions are being taken, but my understanding is that that there are a number of private sector contractors who have now come to an agreement, facilities management contractors have come to an agreement with the official receiver that means that their workers continue to be paid. I think it's important that we say that the official receiver is doing their job of working with those companies. He's raised the issue of bonuses, and of course, people are concerned about this issue and and are rightly asking questions about it. That's why we're making sure that the official receiver's investigation into business dealings of the company is fast-tracked, that it looks into the conduct not just of current directors, but also of previous directors and their actions, and the official receiver does have the powers to ensure that in reviewing payments to executives, where those payments are unlawful or unjustified, he can take action to recover those payments. It's important that the official receiver is able to do their job. It's also important. Government's job is to ensure that public services continue to be provided, and that's what we're doing. The Right Honourable Gentleman said earlier in one of his questions, it was the government's job to ensure that Carillion was properly managed. We were a customer of Carillion, not a manager of Carillion, and that's a very important difference. And it is also important that we have protected taxpayers from an unacceptable bailout of a private company.
Mr. Speaker, when Carillion went into liquidation, many contractors were still unpaid. This company, Carillion, were notorious late payers, taking 120 days to pay, placing a huge burden on small companies, 4 times longer than the 30 days in the prompt payment code that Carillion had indeed themselves signed up to. So why did the government allow a major government contractor to get away with this? Will she commit to Labour's policy that abiding by the prompt payment code should be a basic requirement for all future government contracts?
Of course, we look at the behaviour of companies that we contract with in relation to payments. This question of prompt payments has been one that has been brought up in this House, I have to say, for as long as I have been in this House, and efforts and work is always being done on it. But the Right Honourable Gentleman has raised an important point about the impact of Carillion's liquidation on small companies. That's why this morning the Business Secretary and the City Minister held a roundtable with the banks to discuss credit lines to small and medium-sized enterprises and to make clear that SMEs are not responsible for the collapse of Carillion. The Business Secretary has also held further roundtables today with representatives of small businesses, construction trade associations and trade unions, workers' unions, to make sure that we're on top of the potential effects on the wider supply chain. It is right that we look at those very carefully, that we take those action, and it's also right that we do put in place, through the DWP, support for any workers who do find themselves no longer employed as a result of this.
It's a bit late for one subcontractor. Floratech owed 800,000 like Carillion have already had to make some of their staff redundant because of the collapse. But Mr. Speaker, this isn't one isolated case of government negligence and corporate failure. It's a broken system. Under this government, Virgin and Stagecoach can spectacularly mismanage the East Coast Main Line and be let off a £2 billion payment. Capita and Atos can continue to wreck the lives through damaging disability assessments of many people with disabilities and win more government-funded contracts. G4S promised to provide security at the Olympics, failed to do so, and the Army had to step in and save the day. These corporations, Mr. Speaker, need to be shown the door. We need our public services provided by public employees with a public service ethos and a strong public oversight. As the ruins of Carillion lie around her, will the Prime Minister act to end this costly racket of the relationship between government and some of these companies?
I might first of all remind the right honourable gentleman that a third of the Caribbean contracts with the government were let by the Labour government. What we want is to provide good quality public services, deliver the best value to the taxpayer. We're making sure in this case that public services continue to be provided, that the workers in those public services are supported and taxpayers are protected. But what Labour oppose isn't just a role for private companies in public services, but the private sector as a whole. The vast majority of people in this country in employment are employed by the private sector. But the Shadow Chancellor calls businesses the real enemy. Labour want the highest taxes in our peacetime history. Labour policies would cause a run on the pound. This is a Labour Party that has turned its back on investment, on growth, on jobs. A Labour Party that will always put politics before people.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for visiting Sheen on Saturday when she heard from local residents about the poor services provided by the Replacing the Deaf Council. People should not have to settle for second best. So what she agreed with me that we need to unlock Sutton and indeed London's potential on May the 3rd by giving residents across London the opportunity to make great services and value the money by voting Conservative.
I was very happy to join my honourable friend on the doorsteps in Sheen and hear from people about the issues about Liberal Democrat services in Sutton and Sheen, particularly around the rubbish bins. I believe they're now up to 6 bins per household. I'm beginning to think they're trying to go for one bin for every Liberal Democrat member of Parliament. But he's absolutely right. The evidence is that Conservatives deliver better services and less cost to the council taxpayer. And while we're talking about cost to the council taxpayer, only last week Labour's next Prime Minister announced the Labour policy was to cut council tax on every average house in Cheltenham by £320. People should know that a vote for Labour is a vote to pay more.
Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister tell the House what official advice she has had on the impact of the UK economy from leaving the EU single market and when she requested any such advice?
Well, I'd have to say to the honourable gentleman that, of course, as we go through the Brexit negotiations, we are constantly looking at the impact that decisions that are taken will have on our economy. What we want to ensure is that we maintain good access, a good comprehensive free trade agreement with the European Union, while also, as leaving the European Union, we will be able to ensure we get good free trade agreements with other parts of the world.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 19 months after the EU referendum, and the Prime Minister has not a shred of economic analysis on the impact of leaving a single market. On Monday, the Scottish Government published its second analysis paper, revealing some horrifying facts. Leaving the single market will cost each Scottish citizen up to £2,300 a year. How many jobs have to be lost, and how much of a hit will financial families take before the Prime Minister recognises the folly of leaving the single market?
The honourable gentleman asked me for economic analysis. Well, I'll give him some economic analysis. We saw the figures this morning for GDP growth in Scotland. In the third quarter, GDP in Scotland grew by 0.2%. In the rest of the United Kingdom, it grew by 0.4%.
case of my late constituent, Anne Banyard, who was badly injured by a fleeing shot necklace. She recently died, partly because of his injuries, at the young age of 70. Her claims of the criminal injuries conversational vote have been delayed, and the family care was made absolutely. Will she join me and our local paper News in supporting this case? And will she make it clear that the rights of victims should always be at the heart of our criminal policy?
My old friend is right to put the case for the rights of victims. He's absolutely right. We should always remember victims. I'm very sorry to hear the case of his late constituent, Anne Banyard. And I know that the whole House will want to join me in offering condolences to her family in this tragic case. Of course, as my old friend knows, the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority administers the Criminal Injuries Compensation Scheme and it applies the rules independently of government. But I'm sure my right honourable friend, the Justice Secretary, will be happy to meet with my honourable friend to discuss this case.
Tanlanjit Singh Desi. After the internationally embarrassing news of the Tory council leader from my neighbouring Windsor and Maidenhead and his deplorable attitude with regards to the homeless around the royal wedding, and the recent put down to the Prime Minister and our government by President Trump, can the Prime Minister confirm whether she actually wants an invite to be extended for the royal wedding and a state visit to the very stable genius from the US? Who, by the way, Mr. Speaker, seems to be copying all the buzzwords from this not so strong and stable government.
The honourable gentleman knows that we have a special and enduring relationship with the United States. An invitation to President Trump for a state visit has been extended. I have to say to the honourable gentleman, I'm not responsible for invitations for the royal wedding to take place. But he did reference the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead Council. I just think he should be aware that the Royal Borough has taken a number of actions to support vulnerable residents, including those who are homeless. The establishment of an emergency night shelter which is open 365 days a year, a day service that attached to that providing support services to vulnerable residents, a comprehensive 7-day-a-week service for the homeless or those at risk of homelessness, and he's also, applied the severe weather emergency protocol. They offered accommodation to, I think, 32 homeless people on the streets, of whom 21 took up that accommodation and 11 did not.
Thank you. Prime Minister, cancer can strike anyone, no matter where they live in the UK. Sunrise Appeal in Cornwall raised £3 million since the year 2000 to fund equipment and buildings for cancer care. There are proposals by the NHS to see radiotherapy services moved from Cornwall to Devon. This would see many constituents having to travel hundreds of miles to access treatment many times a week. These proposals are unacceptable to my constituents and the vast majority of people in Cornwall. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that travel time should be taken into account when making these decisions, and will she join me in encouraging the people of Cornwall to respond to the NHS consultation?
Well, my honourable friend raises an important point, and we do want to ensure that patients get the best cancer services. We want to see them getting access to treatment and ensuring that they get that in a timely fashion. And of course, the length of time it takes them to travel to that treatment is an important issue here. That's why we are establishing radiotherapy networks that will review the access issues and service provision on a regular basis and address any shortcomings in the area. And that's backed up by £130 million for new and upgraded radiotherapy machines. But he's absolutely right that these decisions should be taken primarily at a local level, and I would join him in encouraging the people in Cornwall to respond to the consultation.
Mr. Speaker, last week my constituent Harold's son had a mental health crisis. He was admitted to the nearest available psychiatric adult bed in West Sussex, a 450-mile round trip from his home in Wembley in Manchester. The lack of mental health beds is a national crisis and scandal. So when will the Prime Minister turn the all words on mental health into action to solve the problem?
I can say to the honourable gentleman, obviously I'm sorry to hear the experience of his constituent. We are turning the words that we put on in terms of priority of mental health into action. Is there more for us to do? Yes, that's why we're continuing to put an emphasis on this. We do see more people being able to access mental health services every day. We've increased the number of people having access to therapies. We've increased the funding that is available for mental health. There is more for us to do, but we're putting more money in and we're taking more action on mental health than any previous government.
To Desmond Swain.
companies be encouraged to follow her lead in the way that Iceland has done?
I'm very pleased to say that we've seen Iceland this week making a commitment to be plastic free. We've seen other companies actually making commitments to ensure that any plastic stations are recyclable by in a number of years. And I'm very happy to join my honourable friend in saying we will be encouraging companies to follow Iceland's lead. We'll also be consulting on how the tax system or the introduction of charges could further reduce the amount of waste we create. And we're launching a new plastics innovation fund backed up by additional funding that the government's investing in research and development to ensure that we do really reduce the amount of plastic that is used and leave this planet, this land in an environment in a better state than we found it.
We can all learn about brevity, myself included, from the right honourable gentleman, David Linden.
I'm sorry to hear the case that the honourable gentleman has set out. I'm very happy to ensure that that case is properly looked into.
Andrea Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following Transport for the North announcement on Northern Powerhouse Rail, will the Prime Minister confirm the government's commitment to investing in Northern transport infrastructure and ensuring that the Northern Powerhouse materialises?
Well, I'm very happy to give that commitment to the Northern Powerhouse and to giving the great cities across the north the transport infrastructure that they need in order to be able to develop that Northern Powerhouse. We are spending a record £13 billion to transform transport across the north. We've made Transport for the North the first ever statutory sub-national transport body and backed that up by £260 million of government funding. They published their draft strategic plan for consultation, and I would hope that all members with an interest in this issue would engage in that consultation and make sure their views and their constituents' views are heard.
Carol Monahan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. His Holiness Pope Francis has this week condemned hostility to migrants, saying communities across Europe must open themselves without prejudice to the rich diversity of immigrants. As a committed Christian, would the Prime Minister agree with Pope Francis that hostility to migrants is a sin?
What I say to the honourable lady is that this country has a fine record over not just decades but centuries of welcoming refugees and ensuring that people can come to this country and make their home in this country, and that is what we will continue to do.
John Smith.
John Worboys is likely to be one of the worst sex attackers our country has ever known. When he was in court, he denied his guilt. He was continuing to deny his guilt up until 2 years ago. He dismissed his crimes as banter. And only last year, he was deemed too dangerous to open release conditions. The short sentence he has served is an insult to his victims and shows a contempt for justice. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that the decision must now be conditionally reviewed and that the police should immediately reassess those cases which were not tried in court?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising this, and this is a case that has rightly raised deep concern among the public, but also across all members across this House. As my honourable friend will know, the parole board is rightly independent of government, and even in sensitive cases such as this, we must ensure that that independence is maintained and we don't prejudice decisions. But they have, although they've decided to approve his release with stringent licence conditions, my right honourable friend, the Justice Secretary, has made clear that he is taking legal advice on the possibility of a judicial review of this decision. And it is also the case that the Justice Secretary said he'd been conducting a review to look at options for change in this issue of transparency of decisions by the parole board, because public protection is our top priority. I think often people are concerned when they see decisions of the parole board being taken and they're not aware of the reasons behind that. There may be limits to what can be done, but I think it's right that we look into this case and question this issue of transparency.
Dr. Lisa Cameron.
My constituents informed me that she had been repeatedly raped and beaten by her ex-partner.
intervention. Much to her horror, the bank could not close their joint account unless she attended with the perpetrator. When banks are left to their discretion, women's lives are being put at risk. While the Prime Minister ensured policy to protect survivors is included in the Pending Domestic Violence Bill.
Yes, well, the Honourable Lady clearly raises a very distressing case, and we want to ensure that we do give proper support to all those who have been subject to domestic violence or to abuse of the kind that the Honourable Lady has referred to. The Home Secretary will be issuing consultation shortly on the proposed domestic violence legislation. This will be an opportunity for issues such as this to be raised.
Damien Moore. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A brutal attack occurred in my constituency over the weekend, castigated young woman tragically died. Will the Prime Minister extend her sympathies to the family of Cassie, as well as paying tribute to the hard work of the emergency service of 10%?
I say to my honourable friend, obviously he told me about this very distressing case last night, and this is a horrific case, and I do extend my sympathies, and I'm sure the whole House extend their sympathies and condolences to Cassie's family and friends at this tragic death that has occurred. I also congratulate the emergency services on the action that they have taken, but also I think from the description my honourable friend gave to me last night, I think we should also have some thought and care for all those who will stand with witnesses to this particular incident, through no fault of their own other than happening to be in a particular premises at a particular time.
David Simpson. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister will be aware that Northern Ireland has not had a government now for over a year. Decisions need to be taken to protect our health service, education, and local communities. Does the Prime Minister agree that in the absence of a government being formed, it is imperative that the government takes the decision to appoint a new minister as soon as possible so that a budget